A key component in the final collapse of the Star League lay within the house that founded it. So much of its fall can be tied to the tragic story of its final ascendant to the throne. To understand it, you must understand him, and the key players who would see this sad chapter in mankind's history play out. The last ruler of House Cameron was Richard II. With his parents dying, and with him at such a young age, he had no one to truly guide him into adulthood. Alexander Kerensky, arguably a relatively poor father himself, was too busy to offer him guidance, preparing for conflicts as well as managing the empire that the Star League was, all while trying to manage the ambitions of the House Lords and preventing them from acquiring even more power than they already had. This left him as a lonely child. Those who were his peers in Unity City, the capital of the Terran hegemony and the Star League, were few in number and afraid to befriend the soon-to-be powerful lord. Beyond that, he only had butlers, maids, and servants to keep him company, who only complied to his wishes due to his title, and showed little real care or concern for him, keeping themselves at a distance as the future lord of the Star League. A truly lonely boy, he had all the world at his fingertips, and no one to care about him. An ambitious figure from the periphery, the Rimworld's Republic to be specific, would be planning his own ambitions at this time. Stefan Amaris, a man who modeled himself after Genghis Khan in appearance as both a ploy to deceive others and as a signal to his true ambitions as a person, was an elaborate manipulator and political animal. He began to frequent the royal court of the Star League shortly after the Regency began, taking pains to learn everything he could about Richard, from his obsession with medieval stories and a love of the mythology around it, as well as taking into account his profound loneliness. An outsider with a mixed opinion from the court, Stefan still presented himself as a largely harmless ruler from the outside, coming on behalf of his people for various causes, and to improve relations with the Star League. Stefan, in reality, was a vengeful man who hated the Camerons and the Star League in its current form, ruled by the Inner Sphere, who viewed themselves as better than him and his family, and never giving them the recognition which he believed they deserved. His plans were to turn Richard into his creature, by being his only friend, and to mold him into the pawn that he needed him to be. Sadly, for both Richard Cameron and the Inner Sphere, Stefan Amaris would succeed in this largely, with Kerensky barely being present, and Amaris, the only one of any authority near the boy, forming a bond of friendship and mentorship with him. He would twist Richard into a petty, jealous, and paranoid teenager and young man. The periphery itself during all of this became increasingly unstable. Organized resistance movements launched lightning attacks on the Star League Defense Force, causing horrendous death and suffering to their occupiers. These attacks were largely done by sabotage and guerrilla warfare, with the tactics of asymmetrical warfare. The local garrisons were poorly equipped to handle this situation, so the SLDF released the Special Armed Services to handle the task. What would happen would be a brutal bloodletting from local insurgents and special forces, with civilians caught in the middle. It was an ugly, bloody affair, and Kerensky's entire attention was drawn to it, trying to keep this peacekeeping operation civil, but looking on in horror as it became the bloodbath that it was. The governments of the periphery itself were also primarily the funders of the local insurgent forces. Only the Rimworld's Republic seemed to not be involved with these activities. The individual house militaries of the Inner Sphere had burgeoned in this time, growing larger and more powerful as resources were confiscated and moved by the houses to secure their own interests. It was becoming a drain on the economy. In fact, that was causing massive problems in every part of the Star League, as it supported these inflated house militaries, private militias, and the Star League Defense Force, the largest military of them all. The costs were becoming real, and cooperation between these regions began to break down even further as High Council meetings were sparsely attended by the High Lords, as they preoccupied themselves with their own realms, particularly with their military positions. Everything was beginning to fall apart seemingly, and there was no leadership from the First Lord. Amaris himself was delighted with the chaos, viewing it as a means to secure more power for himself, and to manipulate his near-adopted son, Richard. Richard was now a teenager by these events, and began to acquire the elements of authority. Stefan would be knighted by Richard upon his official joining of the High Council for the first time, and would withdraw Star League defense forces from the Rimworld's Republic, as there was no need to keep troops in a friendly realm, given it was the only periphery state that could be trusted, in fact. This was a shock to the other lords in attendance. This also caused discord with Kerensky, who Richard had ordered to hand over all Star League Defense Force facilities to the Rimworld's military. The general rejected the order, but eventually yielded to the teenager in the guise of a king, but only after ordering all the facilities to be stripped down of all their vital components. A poor job was done, and information and technology were left behind in substantial quantities for the Rimworld's military to make do with. Richard's life was essentially a fantasy world, as he grew into a man throughout these events. He lived in a make-believe world where he was a noble from a bygone era, with delusions fed by others who played along in their various roles. He became detached from the common people, viewing them as lesser and viewing a noble with strength as always being right, and given he was the highest position in the Inner Sphere in theory, he was the most powerful man alive, and his justice and power were first among all. Nothing had ever challenged this view of the world, either. When fighting broke out in the houses in 2760, as House Davion and House Liao clashed over their raids with one another, escalating to something darker and uglier. The war gave neither party an advantage, however, as both sides bled themselves, and no one seemed keen to get involved on any level. In 2762, Richard became a man and would insert himself into this problem. Unfortunately, Richard was not a man who understood politics or reasoning. His first edict was Executive Order 156, which ordered all house militaries to disarm. This was a political impossibility as well as an illegal order. The Star League's laws and charter ensured the realms could build and maintain their own forces. With low-level conflict raging in the periphery as it was, the Star League Defense Force was also in little position to do anything about this either. Even as the largest, most powerful military, it would likely not be able to fight the whole of the Inner Sphere to enforce this order either, and that was provided it was willing. It was not. Richard had placed this order as his first means of avenging himself upon the House Lords as well, who he viewed as his enemies, real or imagined, now that he was given the full power of his position. This fantasy of power vanished shortly after the edict. Kerensky did not support this, and openly told Richard in a meeting with him and Amaris. The young lord began to lose his nerve, but under the urgence of Amaris, would present this order to the council all the same. The High Council meeting was not one of camaraderie to say the least, as the High Lords fired back at Richard, denouncing his proposal. Amaris attempted to manipulate the situation, but to no avail. Kerensky himself was asked to weigh in, but all he did was point out the illegality of the order. Order 156 was rescinded, and Richard Cameron II was left with the grim reality of having overstepped his boundaries, something that he had not truly believed was possible up until that point. He went from a lion to a meek child on a throne, revoking his own order before the rest of the council. Richard went into seclusion afterwards, believing himself further aggrieved and believing everyone, including Kerensky, conspired against him. Amaris would begin to move with his own plans, having poisoned the young lord's mind. He met with Kerensky, offering him information on rebels in the periphery realms as a peace offering between the two men, who deeply despised and mistrusted one another. Kerensky informed Amaris that his influence on Richard had been uncalled for, and that the Lord needed to guide his own path, though he gave him no order to leave, which surprisingly Amaris agreed to all the same, stating he had to return to his own neglected territories to govern. They did not leave as friends, but there was seemingly a calm between the two men, even if it was an uncomfortable one. This was another piece for him to play, however. Upon preparing to leave Terra, Amaris lied to Richard once more, stating he had been ordered by Kerensky to leave, though feigned that Richard should not be angry with the old officer as he took notice and left, supposedly sacrificing his own happiness on Terra to return to his home for peace. In this departure, he offered Richard an agreement. If the Star League were ever in crisis, he asked for permission for his forces in the Wormworld's Republic to deploy to Terra in order to assist, assuring him that his realm, the only loyal Periphery realm, could spare the soldiers. Richard accepted the terms eagerly, believing the man he saw as his friend, and a father figure, had his best interests at heart. His only true friend at that. 1 year later, in 2765, the entirety of the Periphery rose up officially against the Star League, barring the Rimworld's Republic. Years of abuse, high taxes, exploitation, and occupation had been enough. A bitter, bloody war emerged, and only drew away the SLDF's attention. The Periphery, outgunned but fighting a people's war, fought with bravery, fanaticism, and any tactics that they had at their disposal, even the most savage and self-sacrificing in nature. The SLDF forces in the Periphery were shattered by the end of 2765, and would be forced to retreat to the Inner Sphere with what little they had left, awaiting reinforcements and reorganizing their mauled units to participate in a vengeful counterattack. 60% of all Star League defense forces had already been redeployed by now, and the First Lord Richard Cammon asked the other House Lords with their substantial militaries to help subdue the rebellion. The request was met with silence or with derision. The Star League would fight this battle, not its member states. Paranoia began to take place as well as more Star League defense units were moved to the Periphery. Cameron believed that the hegemony, lightly defended and even undefended in many instances, would fall prey to the houses as they began to move their troops along the border. These rumors themselves were fostered by Amaris. Richard invoked his treaty with the Rimworld's Republic, which he had hidden from the public and General Kerensky. Distrust and uncertainty bloomed in the hegemony as foreign troops began to arrive. Ironically, the current ruler of House Kurita, the house responsible in the past for helping arm the Rimworld's Republic, would be the sole voice to truly speak out during all of this, distrusting Amaris and his intentions. However, the Draconis Combine was the least trusted by any of the other House Lords. Richard Cameron and his advisors suspected nothing as well, as Amaris deployed a full half of the Rimworld's military to the region. They were deployed alongside the remaining Star League Defense Force units that remained in the area and were deployed also among the personal forces of House Cameron, including alongside the vaunted Blackwatch. With everything in place, Stefan Amaris flew to Terra. Days of infamy, when some heinous act or crime is committed, are always bright and sunny. All have their faces pointed to the peaceful heavens above, making it easier to slip them the knife. Stefan Amaris to his officers, the day after he usurped the throne of the First Lord. Stefan Amaris would arrive in Unity City on December 26, 2766. All of his people were in place, and the noose lay ready for his final plan. On December 27th, on what was described as a cold but beautiful day after a snowstorm the night before, with skies open and clear, Stefan Amaris walked through the snowy grounds of the First Lord's residence, before entering into a building with ornate decoration and white marble adorning the ground and pillars around them. He would arrive in Richard's audience chamber with a smile, glad to see his young ward one last time. After a brief exchange, he offered the First Lord a gift. From one friend to another, a small, beautifully crafted box. Within lay a gemmed pistol, with the shark's emblem of House Amaris crafted into the grip. Amaris reached for the pistol, taking it from his charge, before informing his friend, Richard Cameron II, that it was a very special pistol, made to his exact specifications. Stefan would aim the pistol to the First Lord's head, just as an explosion was heard in the background, uttering, "It has begun," before he opened fire. The body of the First Lord dropped to the floor, the last member of House Cameron to ever hold the title. Though it would take weeks and months to gather the remaining distant relatives of House Cameron after the bloody coup, as war exploded across the Terran hegemony as desperate Star League Defense Force and private forces, cut off from their supplies and peers, desperately fought for survival, the remnants of House Cameron would be brought before Stefan Amaris and executed as well. Butchered, killed to a man and woman, even the children, no one was spared. House Cameron was gone, forever. Now, at the heart of the Star League, a new house claimed ownership of the Terran hegemony and the Star League. House Amaris. Thank you for joining me here today. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel. In our next Star League video, we're going to begin talking about the response to these actions. With that, I will catch you in the comments section below.